Welcome to Be Lifted Up, your guide to living an abundant life. I'm Alfred Edmond Jr. and here with my co-host,
DC Marshall.
And we have another great show, another powerful conversation about abundant living in the real world. Today, we're talking about faith, voting rights, and power. You know, we're in a really unique time right now. We are once again fighting for the right to vote, fighting to protect voting rights, advance voting rights. But we're also growing in faith with everything that we've been through with the pandemic, with the changes in our experience with systemic racism and us challenging that. There's a lot of change going on, but there's a lot of conflict and battle and crusading, if you will, for the things that in many ways, at least a person of my generation, thought we won all these battles already. What say you?
You know, it's frustrating, to be quite honest. And so I'm glad we're having the conversation. I just think where we are in this country, we need all hands on deck. I feel like our entire culture, our entire generation, like everybody needs to understand how important our voting rights is and what's happening in politics. A lot of people are not paying attention. And it's so unfortunate. So I'm glad we're having the conversation. I think this is all hands on deck. And you're absolutely right. Never in a million years did we believe that we would be back here. In fact, one of the organizations that I belong to and a client is really active in the work. So I'm looking forward to talking more about it. That would be the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation, you know, Alfred.
Yes.
And Black Women's Roundtable, Black Women Leaders and Allies. So we are going to talk about it all. And when we come back, this is Be Lifted Up, your guide to living an abundant life. We'll be right back.
Welcome to Be Lifted Up, your guide to living an abundant life. And today we're talking about faith, voting rights, and power. And my co-host, D. Marshall, I mean, every week I always say we have the best topic for D because D is really on this. But D, you really are on this conversation about voting rights, about engagement, and as a person of faith, that we need to be engaged in these conversations. But talk about what you see happening, particularly now, as we're back to fighting for something that many of us thought was a done deal that we'd already overcome. Talk about, again, the people you're working with, Melanie Campbell.
Yep.
I'm just such a big admirer of what you're doing in this space when obviously you already have a business to run,
Yeah.
your girlfriend's pray, but this is something you really been exhibiting a lot of passion around over the last couple of years.
Yeah. I'm excited that we're talking about it because I think some people want to know and some people just are not in the conversation. So when they do hear, they're like, oh, okay, thank you. And I think that's part of having everybody do their part. In other words, or civil rights and social justice organizations, they need to lead in the work and then engage us in a lot of ways. And so Melanie Campbell, who's the president and CEO of the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation, is one of those leaders. You know, a lot of times when we see civil rights leaders leading, we'll see the four. We'll see NAACP, Derek Johnson. We'll see Mark Morial with NUL, and then we'll see Reverend Sharpton at National Action Network. But there's always a fourth. But the reason we don't see the fourth or hear about the fourth organization so much is, I think, because it's woman-led, and Melanie is just a foot soldier. She's a general, actually, boots
Yes.
on the ground, and she
Yes.
really is about the work. But in terms of just engaging, and let me just say this. So Melanie Campbell and the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation, you know, civic engagement and social justice is her work and the work that they lead. But she also has an arm of NCBCP that is the Black Women's Roundtable. Baddest Black women on the planet are part of Black Women's Roundtable. And how I came to know voting rights, and even Alfred, to do some of the things that I do now was coming through the Black Women's Roundtable, and then just leaning in a little further. So, I'm excited that we get to talk about this, but just to frame this for a second. So my company, Diverse and Engage, we speak three languages. So leadership development, workplace culture, diversity work. Our clients we are tier one for probably 90% of our clients are corporate. But I have the privilege of working with Melanie Campbell. She's a client. We advise her on corporate diversity and inclusion and those connect points. And so we get to do some work with her that is largely some of the corporate work. So we're like a tier two supplier, you would say. And that is how I was able to lean in a little further and do work in this space and come to learn. Last year, in fact, in July, Melanie Campbell led, it was historic. Many people don't know, but she rallied Black women leaders to protest,
Yes.
on behalf of voting rights. And it became a thing. It became, Black women leaders. And Melanie has a way of really mobilizing all of the Black women leaders. So not just Black women, but the leaders and from members of Congress. And believe it or not, on July 15th of last year, the first protest, and guess what happens? We go with bail money. That's how Melanie rolls. And with Congresswoman Joyce Beatty. And it was such a powerful a moment, but also a movement. And it helps to educate those of us who are just one step back, right, Alfred? We're not directly in the work, but we are very close in proximity. We have ways that we could support Alfred with regard to our platforms, with regard to our access, right? But we're just one level removed. But that's how I have been able to work with Melanie Campbell, and then to be on the front lines and in the protests, one part as a member of this, Black Women's Roundtable that our civil rights greats really led. Dr. Dorothy Irene Height founded Black Women's Roundtable. It's some of the baddest Black women on the planet. When I tell you they don't play, they here to agitate, and they are not playing about Black people. They are the gatekeepers of the community. And so I thank you for asking the question. I'm really grateful for the topic, because I do think more of us want to know. And how do we get involved? What do we need to do? Whether it's writing letters, is it petitioning? Is it, calling our senator? Is it going to, Capitol Hill? That's why I'm glad for our guest today to break it down a little further. But that's what I just wanted to share about this conversation on voting rights, because we are fighting for our voting rights. And when I tell you this is going to be a sad situation if we don't do something, that is the truth.
There's a couple of things I want to highlight as we bring our guests in. We're talking about engagement on behalf of others, not just ourselves. When we're talking about advocating, the leaders who are advocating for voting rights are often people who are, quote unquote, they're doing fine in their own personal business, financial lives. It's about others that they're serving. And to me, that's a Christ-like mindset. It's not a coincidence that the traditional civil rights groups was rooted in the church back in the day, when we thought we had won these battles 30, 40 years ago. And so I think it's important as we talk about civic engagement and faith, that those two things go together. And I like to say that even when you look at all of the national civil rights organizations, Urban League, NAACP in particular, which is relevant to our guest, there's the 30,000 feet organization, that's the national organization, but the boots on the ground is the local chapters. That's who's doing the engagement.
That's right.
With that, I want to bring in our guest for this conversation, who's head of the Bergen County, New Jersey, NAACP, Jeff Carter. Jeff, welcome to the show and to this conversation.
I'm glad to be here with you all, and I look forward to an excellent dialogue and conversation.
Jeff, I just mentioned, because I say this with reverence, I'm a student of Black business history, but Black history in general. Of course, I work for the late Earl Graves Sr., the founder of Black Enterprise, who was very much engaged in the civil rights movement with Dr. King and Coretta Scott King, that he was shaped and molded by that experience. And it's because of that, I really do understand that the work that Dee's talked about, the engagement, the getting people on a local level to understand how this relates to them, happens with the local chapters, happens with the boots on the ground in communities all around the country. Talk a bit about your work and why you do it as head of the Bergen NAACP.
Well, I kind of grew up in the civil rights movement. My father was an Episcopal priest in Pittsburgh, and he was growing up being a Black priest in a white church. You were always fighting for justice and freedom, and a lot of things that he did. The Poor People's March came through and stayed in his church when there were issues with housing. They got the Black contractors together. They bought houses, and we're talking the late 60s, early 70s. They bought the houses, had the Black contractors build them, and then sold them in the community. So I think one of the things we've gotten away from is self-help in the communities. And, you know, we have gotten to a point where we're waiting for other people to do stuff for us. And we need to, you know, do it ourselves. We have a lot of geniuses, a lot of hard workers. And, you know, I think we've gotten to a point lazy and rely on the government to do things. And the government is only as good as we make it.
Listen, we got about a minute left in this segment, so we're going to definitely come back and dive in deeper. I think it's very important that we make the point that I think that it's the point that I think you already touched on. When we're talking about voting rights, when we're talking about power, we're talking about things like housing, like education, like access to resources, like transportation, that there's a direct connection to the quality of people's lives, which is why the work that we're doing is so important and why this should matter and does matter to people of faith. Listen, you're listening to Be Lifted Up, your guide to living an abundant life. I'm Alfred Edmonds Jr. with DC Marshall. We're here with our guest, Jeff Carter of the Bergen County NAACP in New Jersey. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Be Lifted Up, your guide to living an abundant life. We're here with Jeff Carter, head of the Bergen County, New Jersey NAACP. Jeff has already, laid out some very important points, even with the opening segment. Jeff, talk to us about the work that you're doing right now when we're talking about voting rights and just the needs that you're looking to meet through your organization and through your tradition as a second generation, it sounds like maybe third generation civil rights leader.
Well, I think you hit on a good point. Everything is interconnected. I look at it like a chain there. You have housing, we have education, we have government, and a lot of times we elect people who don't stand for us. We go to the polls, and what we're trying to do, and we did a few years ago and are replicating now, is we at first would go out and we do voter registration. We pat ourselves on the back and we say, oh, we've done voter registration. But the biggest thing is, in our schools, civics is not taught anymore. What is civics? What is the difference between your local school board and your city council, your county government officials, your assembly? In New Jersey, they have assemblymen and state senators. They have legislative districts. Most people don't know what legislative district they're in. And on the county level, okay, they used to call them freeholders here, which was basically a slave term, and they changed it to county commissioners a year ago, but they don't know what they do. And a lot of people will come to us and say, oh, I'm going to call our senator for this, whether state or, U.S. senator, but that's not where they need to be. And, one of the things I go around and tell people here in Jersey is that we have a lot of small towns, and your school budget is bigger than your town budget. And a lot of people will say, well, I don't have any kids in the school district anymore, so I don't have to worry about it. Yes, you do have to worry about it, because they're spending your tax dollars. And if your children, and when I say your children, they're all our children, in the town, whether we've birthed them or whether we know them or not, because our quality of life is based on how well they're educated. And we have seemed to let that go. In the old days, if we walked down the street and Mrs. Jones saw you do something and they called your mama, guilty as charged, and you had to deal with the consequences. Now people are afraid to say anything. They don't want to say anything. That's not my problem. And again, that's that chain link fence where we're all interconnected, at the fence, at the boot, arm to arm. And until we get back to that, helping each other, caring each other for each other, loving each other, and what we see now in the mental health issues, which are causing more of the shootings, is we don't love each other enough. We don't respect each other. We see it in the halls of Congress. If I'm not, if I don't believe in the same thing as you, we can't be in the same room. We can't talk together. We can't even be in the same, city. And that's just foolishness, because, God taught us to love our neighbor as ourselves, and we don't seem to do that. We keep moving away from that. And until we get back to faith and loving each other, we're always going to have a lot of problems.
Jeff and Dee, that foundation of loving our neighbors as ourselves, and that not being just words and feelings, but actions, it really underscores for me why this kind of engagement, this conversation among people of faith about our roles in this process is so important. And so, Dee, what I'm hearing is also, Jeff, and both of you, I definitely want to hear your thoughts, is that it's not just about voting registration, it's about civic education. And until you just said it, it just dawned on me, like, yeah, I had social studies in school, I had history, I knew the difference between my congressman and my senator and a local representative and the state representative. And just with a high school diploma, I had a basic understanding of government. And Dee, I don't, that's why I'm fascinated with what Melanie does. I'm a fan of Melanie's, and because it does say civic engagement.
Yep.
But I think Jeff makes an excellent point about we don't know what that means anymore.
He hit Jeff. Thank you for amplifying. That's the miss. In fact, I will tell you, I won't say I wasn't ashamed, but I'm just like, how could we be successful, educated, folks of a certain age and not have an understanding of how the laws are made and passed and sponsored and such. And I only a few years ago, I'm going to be quite honest, really begin to understand it at at another level. And so I think that's a big miss. And I think that's why it's so disconnected in terms of us and our culture and our understanding about the responsibility to support. And to Jeff, to your point about if I live in a particular town, if I live in Bergen or in your neighborhood, but I don't have kids, I'm already disconnected that, I don't need to worry about that. The gap is because I'm uneducated in that area in terms of how all of the things work together. So yeah. And I had this experience. Well, you know what? Let me pause there. So, Jeff, I just wanted to say, thank you for raising that up. But how do we fix that? How do we? I don't even understand how we fix that now when they're having a whole nother conversation about, what our kids are taught in school. How do you address this?
Well, one of the things I said was self-help, and we've got away from it. And I'm, growing up in a cradle Episcopalian because of my father, we've gotten away from the things that we need to do in the church. And when school doesn't do it, and let's call it out and say what it is, we want to, shy away from things. But I, like to hit the nail right on the head with the hammer. And what happens is that if the school didn't teach it, and we know now we have in Jersey an Amistad law, which is talking about Black history, and it was passed 20 years ago, and it has no teeth and that. But if the school isn't doing it, then our churches, our fraternal organizations, our links, Mocha Moms, any organization need to be working with our children, and it's a shame because a lot of adults don't know either, and that is a huge problem. I was blessed and lucky and went for all the wrong reasons. When I was in high school, they had what they called at the YMCA a youth in government. So we went down. I grew up in Pittsburgh. We took over the whole in Harrisburg, the whole state government for a weekend and passed bills, and they had governor, lieutenant governor, and all the offices. And so we learned about that in high school, and we need to train our kids what we've started doing, not with civics, but as the pre-pandemic, a lot of our kids still don't know how and what their legal rights are with the law. So when Martin Luther King weekend a few years ago, we showed the movie 13th by Ava DuVernay. We had a former judge in Teaneck and an attorney there. And so after the movie, they asked them questions. And it was amazing how the children were soaking up information and were thirsty and hungry for information. Well, why can't it be this way? And well, why can't I talk and say, because if it's truthful, don't argue with the policeman. And it was a powerful thing. Unfortunately, the next year it was shut down because of the pandemic. But we thought we were going to have a few kids. We had almost 100 people there, and we have to keep doing things of that nature to engage our youth, and there were adults there too, so they learned. We have to keep engaging, and the old saying is each one teach one, and so we need to do that in our churches, in our organizations, and if we all had small groups and worked on that, it would be much better. But getting back to the voting, we are gonna work very hard, because we understand that, and we are nonpartisan with the NAACP. So let me say that right off the boot. But we know that when the party that is in power in midterm elections usually has a bloodbath. So we're going to do everything we can to prevent that by having people learn about what their rights are and vote.
All right, and we'll be right back after the break. It's Be Lifted Up.
Welcome back to Be Lifted Up, your guide to living an abundant life. Dee Marshall and I are talking with Jeff Carter, head of the Bergen, New Jersey NAACP chapter. Jeff, you made some points in the last segment that really hit me, and I was reminded of the freedom schools that was, back with the traditional civil rights movement, if you will, and the idea that if the systems that are in place are not teaching civic engagement, understanding the system, understanding voting rights, and many of the other things that you referenced in the last segment, that is a role that used to be played largely by churches in our community, and still could be played now by faith leaders and by people of faith in general to, as you said, not only teach the children, but teach one another about those things that both you and Dee have referenced, that in many ways, even when we want to change the system, we're trying to change the system that we don't often all the way understand, and we can't leverage a system that you don't understand. So talk a little bit more about what we could be doing as people of faith, and what faith organizations in our communities and faith leaders in our communities can be doing to, as you said, not just rely on the existing government system that is not always there to serve us, but again, to take some responsibility for getting people engaged, informed, and educated about their own power and responsibility.
Well, I think, again, the church has gotten away. Evangelism comes in more than one form. And evangelism can be in teaching, not only bringing people back to Christ, but informing people of what's going on. And it's important because, as this pandemic rages and we've been locked up in our houses, we've switched on our part from just being a civil rights organization, which we clearly are. And we've had book bag giveaways. Last fall we had, and I have wonderful people working with me, we had basically a carnival in late August, early September, because people had been cocooned in, and we had face painting, we had a magician, we had, but I always say a party with a purpose. So we had the county there, the hospital doing vaccinations. We had homeless, the county there with the homeless. We had the rental assistance. So we can't forget when we're doing things that we bring in. We brought in all the Divine Nine, and they were there represented. We seem to want to do things as individuals, and that's in the church. My church versus your church, and they're not. We're not in competition with each other. Where we should be unified. The same thing with the Greek letter organizations, and I'm a member of one. We have gotten away from our mission and forgotten what we are supposed to do, because we were here as educated Black men and women to help the community, and we are trying to check a whole lot of boxes, and as I call it, for show, and not and lacking a lot of substance. So it's important that we get back to our mission in the churches, and that we get out, work with each other, and that's going to be our plan. We have, as I said, voter registration, voter education, and then we're going to do, if you want to call it down in Georgia, but souls to the polls. This year, for the first year, we had early voting in New Jersey, and a lot of people didn't know about that. So we tried to, we had some kinks, but we tried to get people out early to vote. Don't wait until the last day. Go out and vote. The same thing with vote by mail. That was done during the pandemic, and that was a lot of issues because they were throwing people out because of their signature. The NAACP, our state branch, sued and won, because when you vote, it shouldn't be thrown out unless there's some reason that, and we call that voter suppression up here, even though it was not only African Americans, but it's still voter suppression. But we have to work with each other. That's the key thing. Gather all our allies, which should be everybody in our community, because when we win together, and when we lose together, and we can't forget that. But the key thing is we have a lot of church vans sitting around that could be taking people, and that's what we're going to do to the polls. Again, this doggone pandemic, we had a hard time, again in the past, because of social distancing, how we get people there. We don't want to get people sick. But prior to that, we utilized cars, we utilized church vans, we utilized any people that had vans to be able to get people to the polls, engaged. We need to go to our senior centers. Those are the people who vote. Make sure that they're engaged. Make sure that they know the issues. I'm going to one on Tuesday to talk with them about, making sure that they have a part of being a good leader is listening. And I try to listen to what the people in the community are saying, because they'll tell you, if you sometimes we get blah 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 and don't want to listen to what they say. But if we listen to them, a lot of times in all our small towns, we're having the same issues. So I'm starting my listening campaign. We've put it together a voting committee, voting rights, voter education, and Jersey Souls to the polls in North Jersey, to make sure that we get people engaged. And we also are going to go into schools and try to get the youth groups. We have a youth group that is in the schools, talk about that with our AXO program, make sure that they are engaged. And it's important, because a lot of times we leave out the youth, and that's why we did the youth program, because I found that when we were doing MLK weekend, we were doing all adult things, and we were leaving out the kids. Well,
Right.
I'm not going to be here forever, and we need to definitely engage our kids. So we're going to put an all-out push with the organizations. The Greek letter organizations have mentoring programs, and other groups have mentoring programs, and we're going to try to dive into those to make sure that we can, get everybody that wants to be engaged.
What strikes me about all the things that you were saying, Jeff, And I'm going back to what does it mean to really walk the walk of being a Christian, walk the walk of being Christ-like. And it's what we do for the least of these. So it's very easy for those of us who are, I'll say, more franchised, than others. You know, we got the degrees, we have businesses and careers and jobs. And it was said earlier, oh, I don't have kids in the school system anymore, so I don't really need to care about that anymore. It's very easy for the franchised to dismiss, to walk by. I'm thinking of the Good Samaritan story where, you know, the religious leader and the scribe just walked by the guy who got beaten up and left by the side of the road. And the Samaritan said, I don't have to help this person, but I'm supposed to help this person. And so, you know, I know you have some strong thoughts about this because of the work that you do, but this idea that as church folk, as religious folk, we're not being Christ-like if we say, we're good, I'm good, my church is good, my community is good, therefore I don't necessarily need to engage with those who may be outside my community, outside my economic bracket, outside my fraternity, outside, you know, my church. That's you know, that's not really my problem, and that's not Christ-like.
Yeah, you know, I would just say to that, the church piece, what concerns me is that we need an entire new way and approach of even engaging. Because even if you think about the church, Jeff and Alfred, you know, the church has changed, and the church, in many ways, according to Pew Research, is dying or at risk of dying based on Gen Y checking out. Number one, and number two, and I know we have a minute left, so we may have to come back on the other side of the break and talk about this. Not just Gen Y checking, actually it was, yeah, millennials are checking out of church, but also just the new look and feel of what church now looks like. You know, when we come back, I want to share, because I did an initiative with Sojo and with Dr. Barbara Skinner Williams. It was specifically to engage young pastors. And I created this brand YP1000 specifically to engage. You remember that? Yes,
Yeah.
I pulled you in. So on the other side, guys, I would love to perhaps we just you know, continue this conversation and just look at some of those challenges with the church should be the go-to, but it's the old church, Jeff and Alfred. But like, do we have that in the new church? Because the dynamics have changed, people have changed. So listen, hold that thought. We'll be right back. This is Be Lifted Up, and we'll see you on the other side of the break. So before we went to the break, we were talking about the role that church or the opportunity and perhaps the responsibility that church really has, or the opportunity that the church has with really helping us in the area of voting rights and just our challenge and our needs around voting. And what I was saying is, well, yes and no. Yes, but the church has changed. So not quite sure that the current or the new church is how we're going to get it done. Like, I'm just not sure, because everything is virtual, everything is online. Look, I founded a ministry 10 years ago, Girlfriends Pray. It was virtual back then. So I understand the changing dynamics. I've served a very large church. My mentor pastor, actually, he was a co-host of the show at the beginning, Dr. DeForest B. Soaries, Jeff Carter, I'm sure you guys probably.
In Somerset.
Yep. So that was my
Jersey.
mentor. Yeah, that was my mentor, my pastor, and I worked for the church. And so, you know, but that's a different church then. And by the way, he just retired. So, but anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts, Jeff, about when you talk about church, is that the current church or the old church, or do you really think that there's opportunity still with the existing model or with the new model?
Well, I think existing and new, there are always opportunities. You know, a lot of churches are self-absorbed, wrapped up into themselves, and worried about what they can do for themselves. And yes, I said that, and will continue to say that. There are some pastors who work out in the community. When I go, I try to bring people in, and some pastors do, some pastors don't, some pastors will, and some pastors won't. But we have no time to be tired. I leave the ones behind that don't want to do it, and the ones who want to engage and come out and do things, then we work with them. And uh, you know, I think the issue with the church is, and growing up a youth in the church in Pittsburgh, a lot of the people who were young with me have either gone into different denominations, not Episcopal, or don't go to church at all. And I think the reason is the church has failed to meet the needs of today's youth. There's some that do, and there's some that don't. My kids went every Sunday, and I kind of, they go now, but they're still trying to find themselves. And my oldest is 40, but my oldest doesn't want any politics in the church, and I keep telling him that the only way things got done back in the day was because of the church, because that's the only place people could meet and get together without there being an issue. So we just keep working. We have to pray. We have to keep engaging. It's like that hammer and that nail. We just have to keep beating it, beating it, beating it. And then my father always used to have a saying that, Jeff, you'll understand later. So I'm that old Negro spiritual. I'm no ways tired. I keep engaging people, engaging churches, engaging organizations. And, I say it's the moving train. We were blessed to be branch of the year in the state of New Jersey this year. And it's not because of me, but it's because of we. And Malcolm X had a saying that, the sickness is I instead of we. And when a lot of times people have I instead of we. And when you're only as good as a president or in a business as the people that you surround yourselves with. And if you surround yourselves with good people, you're going to grow and come up with new ideas, because I don't care how good you are as an individual. If you got PhD, QD, MD, you need people around you, and you need a supporting cast. And a lot of times people get in positions and they forget that. So we just have to keep working. We have to keep pushing and keep engaging not only our youth, but adults, because a lot of adults, now, we had voting from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Well, I can't do it. Now there's no excuse. We have early voting. We have how many days we have, you can mail it in. They used to call it, absentee, but it's not absentee. It's vote by mail, because you don't have to be away. And I tell people here in my town, Englewood, they had a third ward city councilman election, and there were 5 to 7 votes that decided the election. Mm-hmm. And so every vote, if 5 or 7 more people would have said, go out and vote. And it's extraordinarily important that we continue to push people. And a lot of times we get depressed, or that I'm not going anywhere. And you just have to keep relying on your faith to say, I'm not going to get tired, and I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to keep going. And I know it sounds like a broken record, but you'll, with the vaccinations, that's the same thing. We just keep doing it. We keep putting sessions on, and then it's like a moving train. It went up. And the same thing with engagement. As people see you doing things, and people see their friends and stuff starting to catch on, that's how. It's not on TV. It's not on, TikTok. It's not on Instagram. It is on that, getting out in the community, boots in the ground, people passing by, people helping people. We've done turkey giveaways. We've done, book bag giveaways. We've given out almost over 1,000 book bags in the last 2 years. And it's because we have great people around us. I have a tandem of 2 people who are always coming up with new ideas. And, they keep hitting home runs, but they're faith-based, number one. And number 2, they care about helping people. And that's something you can't teach in a degree, in a person. You can't teach them to care and love and have empathy for people who have fallen on hard times. A lot of times, like the story you were telling, oh, do I have to stop and help this person? Damn right you have to stop and help that person, because your survival and your godliness says that I got to help somebody, because you know what? That may have been me if it weren't for a few situations that have gone my way that may have gone the other way.
Jeff, you're saying a word and a half, more than a word. And I'm going to shout out my pastor, Andrew Hunt Jr. At Liberty Baptist Church of Chicago. And he literally declared 2 Sundays ago that if his ministry wasn't going to be about impacting the people outside the church, and he says, I don't mean just coming and preaching to them, but bringing food to them, clothing them, helping them find jobs, engage in those communities, whether they're church members or not, whether they're actually church folk or not. He says, because you can't start having a conversation about why they should vote and why they should do this and why they should do that if you're not meeting you're not even acting like you care about their basic needs. So again, there's a church model that's turned inward, to your point about what's going on inside these walls and are we all good? And then there's a service model that I would argue is more Christ-like, that says, yes, we have a ministry inside the church, but our real work is outside the church. And that kind of work, which is faith-driven work, is necessary to get to the point of voter education, getting people to the polls, getting people to understand why they should vote, and also not just wait for the big presidential election, but the local elections, which are actually more directly impacting day-to-day life. But as people of faith, we can't just disengage and think that we're doing the right thing. And Dee, I'm a huge admirer of Melanie for that reason. She's always, before she was head of a civil rights organization, she is that person, that is faith-based and Christ-like in the ways that I think really, really matter.
No, you're absolutely right. And I just think it takes everybody everyone. This is an all hands on deck. And before I got involved, I think my bias was this topic, this issue in our communities. That's not what I do. So that was my thought many years ago. Please don't judge me, people. And then when I leaned in closer, I'm like, oh, wait. Oh, no, this is all of our work. This is all of our responsibility. So we're going to go to break, but I think the conversation is so rich. Jeff, I have such admiration for the work that you do, the work that you lead. We need leaders. In fact, we need you all to even inform us in terms of what our posture and position, or giving us things to think about and process. We follow y'all's leads. Sometimes it really is about the people who are closer than educating the community about what we need to do. And so thank you so much. We will be right back. It's Be Lifted Up, your guide to living an abundant life.
Well, Dee, we had another amazing show that really talked about the role of faith in our everyday life. We had a wonderful guest in Jeff Carter, who is the head of the NAACP chapter in Bergen County, New Jersey. And I think we really got an understanding that being people of faith does not mean that we are divorced from the challenges of day-to-day life, not only for ourselves, but for others. It's another way of loving others as we love ourselves. Kind of the number one commandment of Jesus, to love God and to love one another. And that means we can't, as people of faith, just kind of say it has nothing to do with me, because we're talking about the quality of life for our fellow man. What say you? Absolutely.
So great show. I'm excited that we get to continue the conversation and help educate people so that, our folks can plug in and do what they need to do. So listen, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. This is Be Lifted Up. And you know what? You know that this is a show about faith and finances, and we are grateful to have you join us. We are grateful to have you listen in. We are grateful to have you like and share online, on IG, on Twitter. It's Be Lifted Up. It's letter B, Lifted Up. And please, please, please follow. And let's see, You could follow us. And by the way, did you know we are on Sirius XM? What channel, Alfred?
Sirius XM 141 HUR Voices.
And the Mocha. Go
Mocha
tell them about our podcast.
The Mocha Podcast Network.com. You can find our show. And as Dee already said, on social at B, the letter B, Lifted Up Radio. So definitely check out this show. Tell everybody, all your friends about it. And you can check out other shows in the series.
All right. And that's a wrap. We'll see you next time.